Welcome back. This is episode 99. Who could believe that? 99. That's a lot of episodes. So today we're going to be talking about redemptive renewal. And we're going to focus on a fascinating obsession that Judaism has with the moon. Judaism's obsessed with the moon, you know that? The moon.
Oh, the moon.
We're like obsessed with the moon. I mean, we don't worship the moon, chas v'shalom, that's a different faith system. We don't worship the sun, we worship Hashem. But we have this fixation on the moon, serious fixation on the moon. And in Torah literature, the moon is not only the representation of the first mitzvah that the Jewish people were ever given, which means the idea of a Jewish calendar and sanctifying time, but in fact, the moon becomes a paradigm for nothing less than the redemption itself. The moon is like a paradigm not only for Yetziah Mitzrayim, but actually for the coming of Mashiach. Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, like Isaiah says some incredible things about the moon and its restoration. And it's almost as if something went wrong at the beginning of creation, and everything was like a downward spiral, and it's all going to get fixed. It's all going to get fixed now. It's all going to get fixed. Am I centered now? Let's see. I think I went the wrong way. No. Okay. All right. Are we good? Good or not? Here we go. So the premise of tonight's class is going to be this. There's a clear, the first thing I'm going to do is demonstrate a clear focus in Torah on the moon, and it's larger than lunar orbit. Like it looms very, very large in Judaism, so much so that it becomes like the paradigm for Mashiach itself, for cosmic not only renewal, but transformation and redemption. And the obvious question is going to be, okay, why is this? And I'm going to show you that Moshe Rabbeinu himself was concerned with this, to the point that he was almost perplexed by this. He had a great difficulty because of this very thing. And in order to try and understand this, we're going to go off into some very interesting statements which are made in the Talmud. An interesting question which gets asked about this idea, this prophetic concept that the moon is going to become a sun or a star, and like the challenge that actually provides for Torah literature. It's like this huge challenge, and it's almost like the only way out of this is to find a mystical or metaphorical concept that the moon is representing to us beyond the simple orbit, the way we see it, and its renewal and time. That's basically what we're going to do. Does that sound pretty straightforward? Yes? Okay, good. Now, all of you, no? Doesn't? Which part doesn't?
Well, it does, but I'm like curious how it's all going to...
Right, that does not really seem to make any sense right now. Okay, fine. It will make a lot of sense. I can guarantee you that. First of all, l'chaim. L'chaim, l'chaim. Have no fear, it's only water. It's only water. Everything I say will be sober tonight. Exodus chapter 12. The Pharaoh has been warned about impending doom of Egypt. The Pharaoh doesn't want to listen to Moses anymore. He says, get out of here, I never want to see your face again. Moshe says, that's fine. Have it your way. The stage is now set for the Exodus. And so at this point, exactly 2 weeks before the Exodus from Egypt, before Yetziah Mitzrayim, God speaks to Moshe and to Aaron, Be'eretz Mitzrayim, in Egypt. And there's a big question as to why do we have to say that it's in Egypt? What is the point of that? And Rashi says on a very literal level, it's not inside the metropolis or inside the city because it was idolatry there. This is a prophecy taking place outside of Egypt. And this is the first mitzvah that's going to be given to the Jewish people. This is not just a private prophecy or a personal prophecy, even one that resonates and resounds with meaning centuries and millennia later. This is an actual mitzvah. Never before have the Jewish people been given an actual mitzvah as a nation. This is a nation getting its first mitzvah. This is such an important verse in the Torah that according to Rashi's straightforward, above surface interpretation of the Torah, this is where the Torah should have begun from. This should have been the opening of the Torah. That's something that can't be overemphasized. It's a very important verse. And the beginning of the Torah should be with a mitzvah. Oh, a mitzvah. HaChodesh hazeh lachem. The mitzvah is this month's for you. This month's for you. HaChodesh hazeh lachem. This month's for you is going to be Rosh Chadashim. It's going to be the beginning of all months, the head of all months. In other words, time starts now, right now. Give me a new month. Here is where the Jewish people start telling and counting time. We don't count time from the birth of Abraham. We don't count time from the bris milah of Avraham, or Yitzchak or Yaakov, or the birth of Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. No, that's not how the Jewish people work. We don't even count time, at least not in some ways, from the birth of humanity. In some ways we do, and in some ways we don't. Lachem, for you, for the Jewish people, this is going to be Rosh Chadashim. This is going to be the first month. So the birth of humanity, sixth day of creation, that's going to be the beginning of the worldly reality. But for you, Lachem, this is going to be the first month. First month. And then it says, Rishon hu. It's the first for you. Lachem for you. L'chodshei hashana. Now that's an obvious redundancy. I'm going to do that again. HaChodesh hazeh, this month. Lachem Rosh Chadashim. Lachem means for you, Rosh Chadashim. For you, it is it is the head of the months, right? Lachem Rosh Chadashim. And then right after that, what does it say? Rishon hu l'chodshei hashana. Rishon hu lachem. Sorry. Rishon hu lachem l'chodshei hashana. This is for you, the first month. The first month, it is for you. It's like a redundancy. He could have just said, HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chadashim. In fact, if I would doctor a chumash and give you pasuk beis, HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chadashim, and leave the period right there, and it wouldn't say the idea of Rishon hu lachem l'chodshei hashana, you probably wouldn't even know the difference. You wouldn't say, what does that verse mean? HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chadashim? Yeah, what's the problem? Or at least we could say, HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chadashim l'chodshei hashana. But the idea of Rishon hu lachem, after you said lachem Rosh, seems to be entirely superfluous. Okay, so obviously the Midrash is bothered with this. The Midrash says there's some kind of message that's being conveyed to us. What could that be? The Midrash Rabbi has lots of pages on this, I have to say. Well, it's a lot. There are many, many interpretations on this verse. It is one of the most interpreted and elaborated upon verses in the Torah. One of the interpretations of the Midrash goes like this. What is the meaning of this is the new month, Rishon hu lachem? What's Rishon hu lachem? So the Midrash says like this. Rishon hu lachem l'chodshei hashana kaviyochel HaKadosh Baruch Hu shenikra Rishon. This refers, as it were, to God who is called Rishon. So HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chadashim. Rishon hu lachem. First is for you. First is for you. Who is first? The Midrash says kaviyochel, as if, as it were, God himself is called first. Now we say kaviyochel because God isn't first, second, or third. God is transcendent of a number thing. He's not the first. The first would indicate that there was something before, or at some point, God all of a sudden is. That doesn't make any sense. So it's kaviyochel. It's as if, euphemistically speaking, God is called the first. How? Because Isaiah says, Ani Rishon v'ani Achron. It begins with me, it ends with me. In the end, everything is from God. Okay, so God says, Ani Rishon. God says, I am first. I'm number one. So if God says, I'm first, kaviyochel, the word Rishon is, so to speak, the concept of God is here, Rishon hu lachem, he is first for you. What does that mean? So the Midrash continues and says, not only is God called Rishon, but Tzion Nikra Rishon. Zion is called Rishon. Now, Zion is not a dirty word for Jewish people, even if the world decided that it is. It's just old-fashioned anti-Semitism. Zion actually means the marked spot, and that's called the euphemistic concept of the Beis HaMikdash, ground zero of Jewish spirituality. As it says in the book of Jeremiah, and this is found in chapter 17, verse 12, Kisei chavod marom mirishon makom mikdashenu. So this term refers where God says that the temple is called first, like the throne of glory exalted from the first. That is the place of the Beis HaMikdash. That's the place of the Beis HaMikdash. So God's called first, and the Beis HaMikdash is called first. So Rishon hu lachem, first is for you. God is for you, Beis HaMikdash is for you. All right, very nice. What else is called first? Ve'esav nikra Rishon. Esau is called first. Oy vey, Esav, he's a bad guy. Because it says in Genesis 25:25, Vayetze harishon, the first one came out. So, God's called first, Beis HaMikdash is called first, and Esau is called first. Where is this going? Guess who else is called first? Mashiach is called first. Mashiach, Nikra Rishon. Shenemar, as it says, Rishon Letzion Hine Hinam. The first of Zion, behold, they are here. It's a verse in Yeshayahu Hanavi, Isaiah 41, verse 27. It's referring to Mashiach. And now the Medrash sews up all of the firsts and gives you this seamless tapestry. Yaveh HaKadosh Baruch Hu shenikra Rishon. God, who is called first, is going to come. And V'yivne Beis HaMikdash, he's going to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, which is called Rishon. V'yifra min Esav, he's going to exact payment from Esav. Esav is the progenitor of the nation of Edom. Edom or Edom is represented or identified as Rome, and that is emblematic of our current state of exile. So Mashiach, who is called first, is going to follow after Hashem exacts payment from Rome, representing Israel's final exile. In other words, God subdues Rome, or the West, and when the Western anti-Semitism is subdued, then comes the emergence of the Messianic era. And that's the business of Rishon. V'yaveh Mashiach shenikra Rishon. And when is that happening? B'chodesh Rishon, in the first month. As it says, HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodashim. As the Eitz Yosef says, where did this Medrash start from? What is the issue here? So he says, the Kashale, he was bothered by, my lachem. What is Rishon hu lachem? You already said, HaChodesh hazeh lachem. If you want to say Rishon hu l'chad she'hashana, it's the first month of the year. Jewish people will count months from there. All right. But what's Rishon hu lachem? It's first for you. This is the first for you. Meaning this first is for you. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kavayachol, is there for you. To build the Beis HaMikdash, for you. To exact payment from Esau, for you. To usher in Mashiach, for you. And this follows the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua, that in Nisan we were redeemed, and in Nisan we are going to be redeemed. B'Nisan niglu, u'b'Nisan dasidil nigal. I just chose this as one of many midrashim, which talks about the first mitzvah of the Torah, HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodashim, and that very first verse that it's introducing this mitzvah is immediately referencing the coming of Mashiach. From beginning to the end. There's the whole verse is talking about this Chodesh hazeh lachem. This is the first mitzvah. This is also the end of the saga.
What Esau?
Esau represents Edom.
Oh, right.
That's the galut we're in. So we have all these firsts. First, we'll cancel first. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is first. He brings the Beis HaMikdash, ends Galus, and ushers in Mashiach. And Mashiach is called first too. And it happens, Rishon hu lachem. It's all lachem. This is all for you. Interesting. This is one of many midrashim. I'm going to show you another medrash. We'll go forward to for later on in the Medrash Rabbah. Medrash Rabbah says like this. Chodesh Hazel Lachem, what's going on over here? Ashrei Hagoy Asher Hashem Alikah, fortunate is the nation who God is their God. This is a verse out of Psalms. And the Midrash says like this, Mishabachar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ba'ilomai. When God selected or established His world, so Kavah Ba'ir Asher Chadoshim V'Shanim. At the time when God chooses creation, or chooses to put the world into motion, He chooses the concept of time. Months, they're going to be months, and they're going to be years. Seasons and lunar cycles. And when God chooses Jacob and his children, He established a Rosh Chodesh of redemption. That's when they were redeemed, that's when they will be redeemed, as we see in the verse, a famous verse of Micha, just as in the days when you left the land of Egypt, I will show you miracles once again. And there are a number of other midrashim like this. And many of the Rishonim discuss this at great length, the corollary between the exodus from Egypt and the ultimate redemption through Mashiach. But what is so fascinating is that it's linked directly to the mitzvah of the new moon. So when you want to talk about redemption, exodus from Egypt, that the exodus is the beginning of the process, a process that only ends once Mashiach comes. Okay, I mean that's what the prophets say. But a new moon, the appearance of a new moon, the idea of sanctifying time by virtue of the lunar cycle of the moon's reappearance, like how does that presage Mashiach? In what way does that become the paradigm? That becomes like the parable. You want to know what personifies the messianic coming? You want to know what personifies that? The new moon. Really? Why? The moon has been waxing and waning ever since Hashem put it into orbit as such on the fourth day of creation. Like nothing different happened. There was no change. It wasn't something amazing happened. There wasn't a lunar eclipse, which is also not so amazing. I mean, it's predictable. We know exactly how that works. There's no great surprises there. There's this ridiculous thing out there on social media now that on August 7th, that the world is going to be suspended from gravity for 7 seconds. Yeah, of course, it's baloney. There's no such thing. The world can't be suspended from gravity. It's pure narishkeit. Pure narishkeit. But I saw it on Facebook. It must be true. No, but I think there's going to be a lunar eclipse on August 7th. I think that is true. But lunar eclipses are predictable and they happen all the time. So do solar eclipses. It's not that rare and it's not that hard to understand. We know when these things are happening. Once upon a time, people were terrified by it. Now, it's not so simple. The Talmud says that when we see things like this happening, it should shake us up. These unusual things have unusual messages for us or for the nations of the world, as we'll soon see in a few moments. But at any rate, the fact that we have such an obsession with the moon and the lunar rebirth, and because the moon is reborn, aha, now I know Mashiach is coming. I would be remiss if I didn't share with you that there's a pasuk and a nevuah in the prophecies of Yeshayahu Hanavi. It's not even clear what this prophecy is referring to. It's a prophecy referring to the days of Chizkiyahu, because that's what it seems to be talking about. Or is this particular verse talking about the ultimate redemption through Mashiach? But in the 30th chapter of Isaiah, because remember Isaiah speaks a lot to Chizkiyahu, Hezekiah, and the miracles that happened in his time. And yes, Chizkiyahu was a good candidate for Mashiach. He almost made it, but then he didn't. That's a subject for another day. But some of the prophecies are only talking about the future. And one of the prophecies, which is somewhat shrouded in mystery, is verse 26. It says, "V'hoya or halavana ka'or hachama." That the light of the moon will be equal to the light of the sun. That's what it says. And then it says that the sun will be many-fold brighter, and there's a discussion how many times brighter, 7 or 7 times 7, and so on and so forth. So for example, what does that mean? What does it mean that the moon is going to be shining as bright as the sun? So the Radak says, Rov HaMefarshim, most of the commentaries, Pirshu Pasuk Zel Asad, say this is talking about the future. This is like Mashiach. When Mashiach comes, that this is what's going to happen. That the moon is going to shine as bright as the sun, meaning the moon becomes a star.
Yeah, It has no light of its own.
Of course it has no light of its own. It's just a moon.
Yeah.
Right? And a moon means a heavenly body that's just spinning around in orbit. And there are many planets that have moons. I think Saturn has 7 moons. They're just like heavenly bodies, gigantic heavenly bodies that are spinning around the planet.
At the time of creation, there were 2 heavenly bodies.
Ah, very good.
Was it shining then?
Yeah, so at the time of creation, there's this Midrash that there were the 2 stars whose light was seen on earth. One star we call the sun, whose light we still see, and the other star was the moon. And then the moon said to God, 2 stars can't share the same planet. This is not going to work. If it's either one of us has got to go.
Were they the same size at the beginning?
That's what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like. So God said, yeah, you have a good point. Okay, fine. So you go. He says, L'chi mati es atzmech. Why don't you minimize yourself? And then it's no longer a star, and all of a sudden it becomes a moon. Now, I don't know if we have actually seen anything like that. We've ever seen, I heard of like white dwarfs and black holes. There's a lot of interesting things which I don't have much of an understanding of. I don't know if we've ever seen a star become a moon. I don't know if that's an observable phenomenon. I don't know if we're aware of something like that today. But that's what the Midrash says. Now, Radak says, there is a tradition that all of this is just a metaphor. There is such a tradition. That's just talking about an enormous abundance of good. And how do you kind of illustrate or metaphorize an abundance of good? With a very, very bright moon. Why? I don't know. Does the moon bother you? There's a lot of things bothering me in the world right now. The moon's size is not one of them. I have to say, I don't care if the moon is big or small. It doesn't bother me if the moon is a moon or a sun.
So when Hashem diminished the moon at the beginning, I always thought just size, because when we look in the sky, but he diminished its ability to shine as well.
That's our understanding.
Yeah.
But then it's going to shine again in a very bright way. And I'm like, all right. I mean, I'm looking forward to a lot of things when Mashiach comes. The lunar transformation or restoration, I can't say that's one of them. It's not like, am I supposed to yearn for the restoration of the moon?
Interesting.
I don't know.
What's interesting is standing on Earth, looking at the moon and looking at the sun, they're both the same size, just that the sun is much further away and it's much larger.
Correct.
A lot larger.
To us, it looks the same size.
They look the exact same size.
Correct. So the ancients actually thought that they were kind of the same.
Yeah.
Right? Except that if you look at the calculations that the Rambam bases his Torah calculations upon, you see the ancients were not nearly as dumb as we think. So maybe some very, very ancients didn't know, but some ancients did know. There's an interesting halacha in the laws of Nedarim, that if somebody makes a vow that's clearly not true, for example, he says that marble is gold, makes an oath. He said, I make an oath by God's name that this is a chunk of gold, but we know it's marble. That's a violation of the Torah. Why? Because everybody knows that marble is marble, and everybody knows that gold is gold. I'm going to be very risque and say something that can get me into a lot of trouble. The next halacha is, if somebody says that a man is a woman or a woman is a man, it's the same thing. That's Torah. Sorry, I'm not getting political. I don't even know why that's political, but Torah says clearly a man is a man and a woman is a woman. That's what Torah says. And if you swear that a man is a woman or a woman is a man, you're swearing falsely. You're not allowed to make an oath like that. But what if somebody swears that the moon and the sun are the same size? So there's no violation of the Torah. Why? Because a lot of people don't know that the moon is vastly smaller than the sun. A lot of people don't know that. So when a person would make that oath, or a person would say, I swear to you that the sun is so many times larger than the moon. And the people go, really? You sure about that? I swear in Hashem's name. That wouldn't be a false oath. He maybe needs to explain to people, and the only way they're going to believe him is if he uses an oath like that. So it's a matter of, let's just say, a question. Now, I don't know in today's day and age that halakha would still apply, because I think anybody who knows how to read English today, or has even like a second grade education, knows that the sun is much, much larger and much further away. But once upon a time, people weren't that educated. They didn't know. And maybe there's parts of the world where people still don't know that. At any rate, all I'm saying is that we're having this conversation about the sun and the moon. There's a lot of things that are wrong with our world, and a lot of things that we would love to see change. We would love to see innocent people not being gunned down in Iran. And it's a horrible situation there. And we know when Mashiach's going to come, things like that are not going to happen anymore. We would love to see this tidal wave, this tsunami of hate and intolerance of the Jewish people just recede and disappear. We would love to see that. When Mashiach will come, I promise you, it'll all be gone forever. We would love to see all the people who are struggling with illness have their health restored. Yes, we know for certain it's going to be the case when Mashiach will come. Is that why we should yearn for Mashiach? Actually not. Because that's not what Mashiach's about. What we should yearn for is knowing God. Knowing God. That's because that's what Mashiach actually is about. Okay, so what if I yearn for Mashiach because of other reasons? We had a whole discussion about this. We went through a whole bunch of different possibilities of whether it is okay or not okay, and so on and so forth. So we have somebody with a lot of numbers here telling me lunar restoration is redemption in a snapshot. Even as Job reminds us that the moon itself is not pure, God commands renewal and anticipation, that the redemption begins when imperfection is holy. It's a wonderful psychobabble, my dear friend. But let me talk to you on a very, very elementary, basic level. To you, and I don't know who you are, to you, when you think of a world made whole and redeemed, is the first thing that pops into your mind a luminous moon? Is that making a difference in your life? Who really cares? And I'm not arguing with you. You're right. You're right. Biblically and scripturally, the moon is a snapshot. The restoration of the moon is a snapshot of redemption. That's my question. For heaven's sake, why? And I would like to suggest that this is a great mystery that the vast majority of even learned Jews cannot answer intelligently. You're going to ask them, try to ask them this question. A lot of people don't even know about this, but even those who do know about it, for heaven's sake, like a Maisa with a moon? Who really cares? What difference does it make? But, I mean, that's what the prophet says. You know, it's interesting. The Radak says, and maybe because of this, he says, it could be a euphemism. Why would the moon having lots of light, why would that represent a lot of good? He says, you know, it just means an abundance of light. Abundance of light. He says, for example, we call it tzara. We call a difficult time, we call it choshech. Elie Wiesel's first Holocaust memoir is called Night. Night. Darkness. So, and we have the famous verse in the Megillah, La Yehudim Haita Ora v'Simcha. Oh, so light and rejoicing go hand in hand. So you want to say there's going to be a lot of light. Like fine. You want to say that the sun is going to shine even brighter? Okay, like let's say, I'll give you that. The sun will shine even brighter. What's going to help if the moon keeps shining? By the way, if the moon starts shining like the sun, how are we going to get a good night's sleep? Just saying. Huh? We won't need sleep. I don't know. It doesn't actually say that. I don't remember reading in any text, well, Mashiach will come, we will never sleep again. I don't know. Maybe we will sleep. Maybe we won't sleep. By the way, having to sleep is a wonderful gift. You know that. It's a wonderful gift. Like the Rebbe once asked, I remember this. I remember the Sikha. It was in the very late 80s or early 90s. The Rebbe asked by the Fabrengen, why is it that human beings have to sleep every single day? You know, bears sleep like twice a year or something like that. A very long nap, you know, like teenagers. They sleep for like 6 months at a time. And then they're up for half a year and they sleep for half a year. Like, why couldn't we sleep like twice a week? I could get a lot more done. You know, if I sleep just twice a week, that would be great. And I'm still very young, but I was a little younger. I used to like skip a night once in a while. I'd learn Torah through the night or work through the night. And just like, you know, coast. I'd skip a night's sleep. And I have to tell you, it's not so easy anymore. I can't, I don't know how the Rebbe did it. I can't do it anymore. We need to sleep. Most people need to sleep. A lot of health problems come because of not enough sleep. 8 hours. Yeah, he does say that. Don't remind me.
It's your classes I'm listening to.
It's true. The Rambam does say that. So the Rebbe said that the beauty of having to sleep is you get a chance to start all over again every single day. You had a bad day? Tomorrow is going to be better. Not just better. It's a brand new day. The verse that we base our Moda'ani prayer on says, Chadoshim labikorim. Shiny and new, brand new in the morning. Rabbi Munasecha, great is your faithfulness. For this we say, Moda'ani lefanecha, and we finish off Rabbi Munasecha, great is your faithfulness. The chance that God gave us, this unbelievable chance that we have to have a new day every day. So I'm not so sure I don't want to sleep when Mashiach comes. I want to have a power sleep. That's what I want to do. I want to be able to plug in like an iPhone for 45 minutes and be good to go for the rest of the day. That's all I'm asking for. But having to sleep is great. At any rate, who needs the moon to shine brightly? Who needs the moon to shine brightly? So there's a Gemara that tells us that the moon, and what happens to the moon, has kind of like a unique impact on the Jewish people. And the Gemara says like this. The Gemara brings three opinions. We talked about eclipses before. Solar eclipses, lunar eclipses. So the Gemara says, this is on Masechet Sukkah, on page 29, side A. Reb Meir said, Kol zman shema'orot lokin, whenever we have the heavenly luminaries being minimized, they're, so to speak, stricken, it's a siman ra l'saneim shel Yisrael. It's a bad sign for the enemies of the Jewish people. Who are the enemies of the Jewish people?
Who are the enemies?
Yeah. Don't say everybody. So when we hear the enemies of the Jewish people in the Gemara, it's actually a euphemism. It means us. But we don't want to talk about us. So we say, may it happen to our enemies. But actually it's referring to us. It's not a good sign for us. Why is it not a good sign to us? So the Gemara says, Mipnei shemilumadim b'makos, because we are used to getting chastised. We're used to getting chastised. Mashal sefer, shabala beit sefer. You have a teacher. He comes to the school and he's got a stick in his birch and a strap. And the tzur biyadei, midayig. Who's worried? The custodian? The street urchins? No, mishraga lilkes. The kids who are not behaving. That's who's worried. Who gets the strap, the birch, and the stick all the time? Unfortunately, us. So we have to worry. Now, this doesn't mean that things are necessarily going to happen in a bad way for us. It means it's a siman ra. It's God saying to us, Yidalach, wake up and behave. You see a parent who's hard on his kid, and he's not hard on his neighbor's kid. You say, I don't understand what's wrong with you. Your own child you're so hard on, and you demand so much from, and you put in disciplinary measures, and you're so nice to the neighbor's kid. And the child says, Mom, you love the neighbor's kids more than you love me. And the mother's like, no, I love you. You love me? Well, why are you disciplining me? And you yelled and screamed at me, and the neighbor's kid you just smiled at. We made the trouble together. What is the mother going to say? Silly child. Like, the neighbor's kid is not my responsibility. His or her parents have to worry about them. I'm worried about you because I love you. Chaysech shiv. They say in Ibn Shlomo HaMelech in his wisdom, the who holds back the strap doesn't mean a strap. It's a euphemism. Hold back discipline, not discipline your children. You hate your child. It means you love yourself. You just want an easy life. You have bohemian kids up to all times of the night and sleeping in the morning and not succeeding in school and becoming slothful bohemians for their whole life. That's not okay. Imagine being a teenager your whole life long. That could drive you crazy. So therefore, if we see the heavenly bodies that are being stricken, it's a good sign for us to up our game, to tighten things up. This is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. The sages disagreed. Tana Rabban, Bizman sha'acham aleike, at the time when the moon, the sun has an eclipse, when it's, so to speak, stricken, Siman ra le'evdei kechavim. This is a bad sign for the pagans. Why? Because, as we're going to find out, they worship the sun. That's why they have Sunday. That's when the pagans worship their god. Levan aleike. What about the lunar eclipse? Oh, the moon is another story. That's Siman ra l'sanei shel Yisrael. Why? Mipnei shel Yisrael moinin lelevana. We count time by the moon. And evdei kechavim lechama. Evdei kechavim count time by the sun. Have a solar calendar, seasonal calendar only. So, I mean, the Chasdei David, the Chidah says that, what is the mayor talking about then? Why does the mayor say that if there's a solar eclipse, it's bad for Saneim Shal Yisrael, for the Jewish people? After all, we count time by the moon. So the Chidah says, well, it's not exactly so. We also count time by the sun. Because Moshe Rabbeinu says, Hayom atem yotzim b'chodesh ha'aviv. Today, you're leaving in the spring. Did you notice the weather? How nice it is? Yeah. Oh, great. Why? Because Hashem loves you, says Rashi. Beautiful. But as Nachmanides and the Seforno explain, this is the idea that we have to make sure that Pesach always comes in the spring. And because the 12 lunar months is 354 days, and the full solar cycle is 365 days, so we're missing 11 and a half days, we got a problem. 11 days and 12 hours, and so many halakim, 723 halakim. Out of 1180, we got a problem. 1080. So we have a problem. We have to make up for it. And even the lunar cycle itself is only 29 and a half days. That's a problem. We got a lot of problems. So we have to solve the problems. Problems need to be solved. So we add an extra month every couple of years. Some months have 30 days. Some months have 29 days. And some years have 29 days and some years have 30 days. And we kind of borrow and repay and we make it work. We have a cycle, a full cycle every 21 years. We make it work. So we do keep kind of a solar calendar also. Right? It's not so simple. So this is the opinion of Rebbe Meir. But the opinion of the Rabbanon, which is this is the halacha, is that we worry about lunar eclipses, not solar eclipses. Solar eclipses, our enemies should worry about. The lunar eclipse is a message for us. Why? Because we count by the moon. Okay, fine. So therefore there's this whole Midrashic thing, and the Baal HaKedah talks about it at great length, that the concept of the lunar cycle, the glimmer that appears and then the moon waxes on until it reaches zenith, it's the full sphere, it appears as a full sphere, and then the moon starts to diminish in our appearance, of course. The moon doesn't diminish itself. Is like, it personifies the saga of the Jewish people. Avraham Avinu, it says, was the first glimmer. It was the first silver lining, and things continued to wax. 15 generations later, the first Beit HaMikdash was built. Shlomo HaMelech is 15 generations from Avraham Avinu. 15 generations later, in the time of Tzidkiyahu, the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed. The moon disappears. And that was really the time when the Shekhinah was with us, and we're in exile. Even the second Beit HaMikdash largely is an exilic Beit HaMikdash. It's a functional Beit HaMikdash, but the Shekhinah is not there, and it's the Galut hasn't really ever been rolled back fully. And Mashiach will change everything. So, okay, fine. This is very nice, this personification of the lunar cycle, that it waxes and wanes, and the Jewish people are Meinin L'Levana, whereas the Gemara later says, Doimin L'Levana, our fortunes are in the image of or mimic the lunar cycle. Okay, that's all fine and good, but like, why should the moon become a star and shine as bright as the sun? Like, why is that something to yearn for? Why is it something that should personify perfection in the age of Mashiach? I think it's a reasonable question. I think it's a reasonable question. So somebody's asking here, is this also going to explain the prayer in Kiddush Levana of the moon going back to its original size or state? I think the answer is yeah, at least spiritually. Now, there's a bigger problem in this whole thing. There's a bigger problem. The problem is this. And the Rebbe spoke about this on Achron Shal Pesach, on the Verbringen, the climax of Pesach, which we call Mashiach Suda. And the Rebbe would oftentimes speak about Mashiach concepts. And the Rebbe said that there's something that he doesn't know that it's ever been spoken about before. Nobody ever talked about this. It's like a new subject. He raised a new question. The question was like this. The question was, when we speak about a lunar year, okay, this was 1984. It was a leap year. Speak about a leap year. It was talking about the idea of the leap year and so on and so forth. The Rebbe says, Yeshna davar tamua there's a strange thing. The Rebbe says, I have not found anybody mention this. I have found anybody who mentioned this. This is what it is. The Rebbe said, one of the promises, now this is a time to talk about Mashiach, one of the Yehudim, one of the foretold beautiful things that are going to unfold in real time when Mashiach comes, is V'haya er ha'avana ka'er ha'chama, the pasuk from Yeshayahu. And the Rebbe says, so tell me, in that case, how are we going to have the Jewish calendar as we have it today? Right? Because if the moon is going to be the same size as the sun and shine as bright as the sun, so then there's not going to be a lunar waxing or waning. So what about leap years? And the Rebbe said the whole idea of a leap year is based on the famous Midrash, and it's a Gemara in Masechet Chulin on page 60, which documents this proverbial conversation between God and the moon, and God's response to the moon. Great idea. You're the one, you're it. L'chi mati es atzmech. That the moon is the moir hakatan, the moon is the minor luminary, and all it does is reflect the light of the sun, which is called the moir hagadol, the great luminary. And because the moon is making its orbit around the world, and it makes little orbits within the orbit, it's constantly oscillating. So therefore, there's different configurations of the moon, and it's all predictable, but it seems unpredictable. It's not, and that's why the idea of eclipses is not so simple. That's why it's a rarity. You have to track the moon in its little orbits, which are making the big orbit. But the moon itself is making little orbits as it makes its big orbits. And all of this is like, I guess, going to change, because if the moon and the sun suddenly become equal, so then we won't have a 365-day, 54 is in the Moyer HaKotten, because it won't be a Kotten anymore. And we won't have 365 days. Okay, so you say, fine, so what's the problem? What's the problem? So the Rebbe says, the problem is this. The problem is that the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh, the first mitzvah that the Jewish people got, is the mitzvah of the reappearance of the sliver of the moon. And when the moon reappears, it was called the Molad Halavana. It's called rebirth of the moon. So when the moon is reborn, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until the end of the month when it disappears again. That's the way our calendar works. But if it becomes a star, you're not going to see it waxing or waning. You're not going to see any rebirth. And here is the problem. One of the famous rules of the Rambam, this is in his third principle, is that anything which does not apply forever is not included as a mitzvah. So we have this idea that the Gemara in Masechet Makot tells us that there are 613 mitzvot. There's 248 positive mitzvot, there's 365 negative mitzvot. But nowhere in the Talmud does it tell us what is mitzvah 1 and what is mitzvah 2. So there's no question what has to be done. We know what has to be done. But how do we get to the number 613? Some of the greatest sages of the Jewish people spent much of their life trying to figure out this very question. Rabbi Sadia Gaon wrote a whole book on this called Sefer HaMitzvos Rasag. So did the Rambam. So did the Moshe of Kutzi. The Sefer Mitzvahs Gadol and Sefer Mitzvahs Kotten. Ramban Nachmanides takes exception to the Rambam's book of mitzvahs. He argues with the Rambam about certain things being called or classified as a mitzvah unto itself, and therefore Ramban has to give us his own enumeration. Because if you remove 7 or 8 or 10 of the mitzvot that the Rambam enumerated as a mitzvah, now you don't have 248, you have 238. Uh-oh, how do you get to 248? So some of the things that the Rambam considers to be details, Ramban Nachmanides considers to be primary. Now I want to emphasize, there's no discussion as to what we have to do. There's no argument about if you have to put on film, or if you have to eat matzah on Pesach, or if you have to sit in the sukkah, or if it's a mitzvah to sound the shofar. There's no question about these things. The question is simply, what's a mitzvah unto itself, and what's ancillary or a portion of the mitzvah? Now, mitzvahs which are not for posterity, they are not incorporated in the 613 mitzvahs. For example, we have a mitzvah that a Nazir, a Nazirite, has to shave his hair at the conclusion of his Nazirite period. That's a mitzvah in the Torah. There was also a commandment to the Levites to have a full body shave. It's not a mitzvah in the Torah. Well, did not God command that it be done? Yes, he did command that it be done. However, he did not command that Levium get shaven for the rest of history. That was a one-time mitzvah. A one-time mitzvah isn't included. The Rambam spends a lot of time explaining to us why he incorporated the eradication of the Canaanite nations. Anybody who says that from the Canaanites is basically lying. There is no nation, there are no Canaanite nations. So then the Rambam himself says, why am I including this as a mitzvah? There are no Canaanite nations today, so the mitzvah can't apply. So the Rambam says theoretically the mitzvah does apply. Would there be a Canaanite nation today? So then this would be something to talk about. The Canaanites were eradicated a long time ago and there are no Canaanite nations. And when Mashiach will come and these mitzvahs come back into play, there will be no Canaanite nation to deal with. That's true. So what? Theoretically, it's still a mitzvah. And therefore we could, in theory, have a mitzvah which technically never happens, but it's still a mitzvah in the Torah. Still a mitzvah. But the mitzvahs are not going away. The mitzvahs, it says, mitzvahs einam betelim le'elam. The mitzvahs are never going to stop being applicable. So when a man came along 2 millennia ago and said, hi, I'm your Messiah, no more mitzvahs, we automatically knew he ain't our Messiah. I don't know whose Messiah he is. He's not mine. Why not? Because Moshe Rabbeinu told us we have to keep 630 mitzvahs. Now, a prophet can say that a mitzvah, with the exception of idolatry, is temporarily suspended. Case in point, Eliyahu Hanavi at Har HaKarmel. You're not allowed to bring offerings outside the Beit HaMikdash once the Beit HaMikdash is built in Yerushalayim. True story. How did Elijah bring the offerings on Mount Carmel in Haifa? And the simple answer is, he's a prophet, he's a Navi. And a Navi is allowed to say that today it's permissible. Why? Because of extenuating circumstances, because we had Jewish people who were worshiping other gods. It was a big problem. Eliyahu Hanavi brought about a religious revival, the likes of which were perhaps never seen before or after. Until this very day, we still use the phraseology that was the chorus of the people's response, Hashem Hu Elokim. We say it at some of the holiest times, like the end of Yom Kippur, Hashem Hu Elokim. So Eliyahu Hanavi could tell us temporarily. But if Eliyahu Hanavi came along and he said, no more Jerusalem, now we're in Haifa, then we don't accept that. So the mitzvahs are necessarily applicable forever. That's how we knew Shabtai Tzvi was a false messiah. He started phasing the mitzvahs out. He said, this guy's off his walls, he's crazy. He's a very charismatic guy, he's a very learned guy, he's a very crazy man. And in the end, very evil. But this is the key. The key is that Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, was mass revelation. It's not the word of Moses. It's mass revelation. We saw God speak to Moses. We heard those first mitzvahs. And therefore, anybody who contradicts the prophecy of Moses is contradicting what we call historical facts. And that's not acceptable. The Rebbe says, 1 second. We have this idea that Mashiach's coming is not going to change the mitzvahs. It's a basic idea in Judaism. Well then, what do we do about the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChedesh? In other words, not only is this not a personification of Mashiach coming, it actually is a huge problem. It's a huge problem. It like contradicts a basic axiom about the coming of Mashiach. It shouldn't be counted as one of the 630 mitzvahs because it's only a temporary mitzvah. So the Rebbe says, it is true that the Rambam clearly says that when Mashiach will come, will be olam kimin hoge noeg. The world will continue to function as it has functioned. It's not going to change its functionality, which means the moon is going to be exactly the same. So what then is the meaning of the wolf will lie with the lamb? Wolves and lambs are not best friends. At least the wolf is not the friend of the lamb. So this means, and a leopard is going to be dancing around with a goat. It's mashal v'chida, the Rambam says, all a metaphor. And all these things he says with Mashiach could be metaphoric. So it's true that the Rambam does say that. However, according to most of the other codifiers, we do understand these promises, these prophecies, as literal. And the Rambam himself says in Igeret Chiyat HaMesim, in the 6th chapter, that he doesn't mean it can't be. He says it might not be. It might be a metaphor. So then, Rabbi Rambam, even you say it might be literal. So if it might be literal, even according to the Rambam, how will we do the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh then? So this is not like the idea that Torah is constantly changing. We have to reinterpret Torah. The Rebbe asked a question just a few months before the stroke. It's one of the last questions the Rebbe put out there. He never answered it. He says, "How would you do Kiddush, the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh?" Right? We have this prayer. We say the special prayer of the moon. What if you're on the moon? Nobody could ever ask that question before. And the Rebbe used it as an illustration that Torah doesn't change, circumstances change. The Rebbe didn't answer the question. It's probably never going to be relevant. It's very unlikely that a Jewish astronaut is going to land on the moon and he's going to say, "Hello, Jerusalem, what should I do now?" It's a few days after Rosh Chodesh, but I'm on the moon. Like what? Right? But in theory, like this, it could. Okay, could happen. Fine. So that's not an inherent question. That's not an inherent question. By the way, I mean, the question could be asked: when does he keep Shabbos? The question was, Ilan Ramon Zechernu Levracha asked those questions. He became very close with the rabbi at Chabad of Satellite Beach because he was training for his mission, and he asked him the questions, and the rabbi had no idea. How was he supposed to know such a question? Right? So he asked the big experts in Jerusalem, and it was something that was debated for a time, and they told him, because he wanted to do mitzvahs, he felt he was a man with a destiny. He took a Torah that survived Auschwitz. He said, "It doesn't matter what I do in my personal life. If I'm representing the Jewish state and I'm going to outer space, I have to." They told him, "You have to follow the clock, your wristwatch of when you left Earth. That's how you count time. The last place you are on Earth." So he followed Cape Canaveral. That's where. But at any rate, that's not an inherent question. That's like a technical question. How do we apply the mitzvah over there? There was a group of Jews after World War II who ended up like in the northernmost reaches of Norway, where I think like night is for like 20 minutes or 5 minutes or something during the summer, and day is for like 5 minutes during the winter. Like you have basically continued night. So they sent a letter to the chief rabbi of Palestine, which by the way used to be a Jewish state. It was just called Palestine. So the chief rabbi of Palestine was Rabbi Cook, the famous Rabbi Cook, and they said to him, "What should we do? Like, how do you keep Shabbos here? When do you make Kiddush? When do you daven Shachris?" So Rabbi Cook gave them a typical Rabbi Cook answer. He said, "Clearly God did not intend for Jews to live in northern Norway. Come to Israel." I had this shaila. I flew to China because I was at a stopover in Beijing, and I was in Kazakhstan a few years ago. I had the privilege to be at the Rebbe's father's resting site in Almaty. And so I called one of my colleagues in the Far East. I said, "Okay, I'm leaving Toronto at like 11 o'clock at night. When am I davening?" So he told me how to calculate it, and I came exhausted because I was terrified that I missed the window of opportunity. And basically I had to daven at a certain glimmer. I had to put on my tefillin as quickly as I could, race through Shachris, race through Mincha, and it was time for Ma'ariv. Right? So these are real shilas. But that's not an inherent problem. The moon changing is an inherent problem. So the Rebbe said, what about, there's a bigger question. We have a different statement from the Gemara, which is made in Masechet Nida on page 61. It says, "Mitzvahs betelis la'asad lavei." That there's going to be no more mitzvahs eventually. And the people have nothing to accomplish, nothing to look forward to. Yom Hashem be'em chayfetz. So how does that work? So the Rebbe said that the Pashtos, you could say that, as the Alter Rebbe explains in the 26th epistle, and Igeres HaKedesh Chavav, the Alter Rebbe says that when Mashiach will come, all the mitzvahs will continue as we know them. We'll reach a point much, much later on after Mashiach comes where there's a full resurrection of the dead and everything shifts in. It's a new reality. In that new reality, the old variables no longer apply. So the Rebbe said that would mean that V'haya Eir HaLevana K'Eir HaChama is referring to that distant era, the second Tekufa, the second era, epoch in the coming of Mashiach, the time of Tchias HaMesim. The Rebbe said that this is a very problematic answer. It's a very problematic answer because the way Chassidus describes this verse is it represents what was called the Shleimus or Gemar HaBirurim, the end of Galut reality, where we have to refine and perfect things. And the moon is the last thing that has to be refined and perfected. And if so, it sounds, I mean, it even sounds like from the Mefarshim, but the Rebbe says certainly the way it is in Chassidus, it's like right at the time of Mashiach's coming. And the Rebbe, by the way, did not answer the question. He didn't answer the question.
The calendar, as we know it now, is built around the seasons and the agricultural society and what,
Yeah.
in general terms. So, if the moon is an equal part to the sun, then the cycles, all we'll have is Purim, and the other things won't matter anyways. Like we
But
won't have to celebrate
we're st-
harvests and feeding the other nations and whatnot. 'cause
But
it'll-
we still have the cycles, even though we don't do a harvest right now, or for centuries we weren't in Eretz Yisrael. There was hardly any Jews living in Israel. Nobody was doing any harvesting.
what you're describing, the moon won't have its cycles,
The moon won't have its cycles as a lunar problem. The solar cycles could still be.
so we won't have Rosh Chodesh.
Well, how would we have Rosh Chodeshes? Right? This is a big problem.
What are we going to follow?
This is a big problem.
But it says
But
in
will
the
we need
Torah,
them?
if it says in the Torah.
So
We need them.
So here's what I want to tell you, this business of the moon changing is something which is endemic. It's like Moshe Rabbeinu was already he was disappointed almost. You mean the moon is not going back to the way it was supposed to be? Here's an amazing teaching from the famed Hasidic master Rabbi Yitzchak Barditchev in Kedushas Levi and Parshas Bay. He says, if you look in the words of Rashi, I'll tell you first the words the way it is in the Mechilta. The Mechilta says, what does it mean, HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem? What's Hazeh? This month. Hazeh is a definitive article. What's Hazeh? Where was he pointing? So he says, Rabbi Akiva said, when it says Zeh, there's three things that Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't grasp on a conceptual level. He needed to have visual aid. And what were they? It says Moshe Rabbeinu had a hard time with visualizing the rebirth of the moon. What does that look like? And the way it's explained, we'll soon see in Rashi, the Talmud Yerushalmi explains it, that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know what was the amount, how much light did you have to see? What kind of line of light? What was the shear? What was the shear? And the answer is to appear even like literally a pencil line, like a sa'ira, like a barley. But Moshe Rabbeinu needed to know the shear. He had to visually see it. So Hashem shows him this. He said, this is what it looks like. That's called the rebirth of the moon. And then it says, V'zelacham atome, when it came to the animals which are not kosher, said Hashem showed him all the animals. And then Zeh Ma'aseh HaMenorah, Moshe Rabbeinu had difficulty with the menorah. Couldn't conceptualize it, couldn't envision it. And then there's another opinion that says that even when it came to Shechita, Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't visualize what the Shechita would look like, and God showed him what it looked like. Zeh Shetasa. This is what you could do on the Mizbeach, this is what Shechita looks like. So Rashi borrows this Mechilta, and he develops it. Rashi develops it, and he says, HaChodesh Hazeh. What is Hazeh? So Hazeh requires some kind of interpretation. And he says, Niskasha Moshe al Meilat Halavana. Moshe Rabbeinu had a difficult time with the ruling, with the halacha. How does it work halachically, he says. But what does it mean? What do you see which is cause for sanctification? How much? How much of the moon do you have to see to say, aha, it's Rosh Chodesh now? God showed him like in a planetarium. He said, okay, here's the moon. This is what it looks like. And there's a big dispute if it was actually the real moon or a prophetic vision of the moon. This itself is a big discussion. But God showed him with a finger. You know, like you go on the little kid to pick at a planetarium and they show you where this is and that is. Okay. That's when you're young enough to think that all the planets are neatly lined up and everything is like, it's like you look in heaven and you see everything lined up. So he says, Kazera Eve Kadesh. You see it? That's what it is. That's what it is. Okay. So Rabbi Yitzchak Barditchev says, Rashi tells us, citing our sages, Niskasha Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu had a very hard time with this. Hard time. Amil Halavana. He says, Lama Niskasha. He had a hard time. Well, what's so hard to understand? I mean, the Moshe Rabbeinu was not an ordinary person. He had a hard time. So Rav Levi Yitzchak says, Ki Moshe ratza sheyeh geula biyamav. Moshe said, one second, isn't Mashiach supposed to be coming now? Isn't this whole galut thing is the prelude to a perfect world? Aren't we like leaving Mitzrayim behind and going to Israel and having a perfect world? Isn't this going to be undoing the damage of the moon? L'hachzer begimus halavana. Aren't we going to experience the Oyer halavana ka'oyer hashemesh? K'moshe yeh im yertz Hashem b'bias hargoyel tzedek. And I believe it's a Baditchev. It doesn't say k'moshe yeh b'tchias hamesim. He says k'moshe yeh b'bias goyel tzedek when Mashiach will come. And this is Moshe Rabbeinu's problem. So clearly Moshe Rabbeinu was bothered by the lack of lunar restoration. But we're not bothered by this. So how do we eat this? That's the big question. How do we eat this? I spend so much time building up the question. I hope I have time to give you the answer. So this is what I would like to suggest to you. What I would like to suggest to you is that the way to understand this is in a spiritual way. And we know that there are many, many things that there is even physical and material embodiment of these things. However, ultimately, they represent and personify something spiritual. And why this is relevant is because if this becomes an embodiment of spiritual self-engineering, then the message is really about how we bring about the proverbial restoration of the moon in our own lives, which accelerates that process in a spiritual way, and it may even be physically as well. Like it says, there's the business of the Shor Habor and the Leviathan, the Leviathan and the Shor Habor, what do they call them in English? Behemoth, right? So the Alter Rebbe interprets it all in spiritual terminology. So if in case it doesn't excite you to eat 5,000-year-old herring, it's okay. It's okay. You could still be excited about Mashiach coming because it represents this transformation of how we serve Hashem, where everything is going to be at an elevated level. That's what it really means. Now, the Rebbe once said, doesn't mean that it can't be literal also. Maybe there really is a big sturgeon or something, I don't know, some kind of caviar, an amazing piece of herring that nobody's ever had before, and everybody's getting a piece of this herring, and it's going to be amazing. Okay, I have to tell you, I don't love herring that much, and this doesn't excite me. A lot of things excite me about Mashiach's coming. Ashtikal herring, okay. So you don't like herring either. Oh, Yvei, what's going to be over here? Right? I told the Moroccan guy, I said, you guys better get used to eating herring. And Mashiach's coming, and everybody's going to eat the salted fish. Do you know why herring became popular for Shabbos in Europe? Do you know why herring became popular? Because there's this idea, especially Kabbalistically, that you should have herring, we should have fish at all the meals. So it's an idea. So it's discussed. Even the Shulchan Aruch quotes it, the Magen Avraham quotes it from the students of the Arizal. Should try to have fish at every meal. It's not an obligation, but the problem is that to get fresh fish is not so simple. Especially because people didn't necessarily always live on a river or lake where there was an abundance of fish. It's not the fish are very expensive. So how could you make sure you always have fish? The answer is, ashtikala herring. Have some herrings. You have salted fish. It goes in a barrel. It can last you a long time. I'm actually being serious about this. But most of the Sephardic Jews lived in warmer climates. Fishing was much easier over there. Fishing was much more plentiful. So they never come up with this issue. They never had this issue. They had fish. But in Europe, in Eastern Europe, especially comes the winter and everything freezes over, and ice fishing is not exactly everybody's favorite pastime, that herring did the job. Anyway, but there's this herring fish, this giant leviathan, and this behemoth. How good could the steak taste? Why would I care about steak when Mashiach comes? Is that what we're supposed to look forward to? Become these carnivore meat lovers? Having this unbelievable steak? Well, the Rebbe says it's a whole spiritual concept. And again, the Rebbe said it doesn't mean it won't be literal also. But that's what you're excited about? That's what Mashiach is for you? A great meal? No, Mashiach is, everything is elevated. Everything's on fire. And you might have a great piece of herring too. Fine. So I want to suggest that the same thing maybe is about this business. So there's a fascinating Zohar. And the Zohar says, the Zohar in Parshas Bo, this week's Torah portion, it says, Tochazi, come and see, he says, Kad Olu Yisrael La'ara, when the Jewish people came to Eretz Yisrael, what was the first thing they did? First thing they did, you know what they did when they came to Israel? There was a mass Brit Milah. Because in the desert, they don't have a Brit Milah, and that's another whole story. Why? They stopped doing this mitzvah because they were always, might be traveling, Brit Milah. Okay, fine. And what does it say? About Eretz Yisrael, Eretz asher lo b'miskenut tocha bo lechem. This is a land where you're not going to be eating out of poverty, out of impoverishment. You're eating in a manner of wealth. Now, the Zohar speaks about things which sound literal, but they're all metaphorical and spiritual and Kabbalistic. The Zohar says, why is it called lechem oni? What does it mean, poor bread? And I have to fill in the background here. When the Zohar refers to Eretz, it's referring to what's called midat hamalchut. Midat hamalchut. So there's this spherotic tree. In the spherotic tree, there's an intellectual segment, 3 intellectual dimensions, intellectual creativity, where ideation comes from, development of ideas and concepts, and then pragmatic application, where a person comes to a decision, even developing a bias, a certain approach. That's Chachma Bina Das. Then comes the midot. Then comes right energy. Right-oriented energy is chesed. This is the thing that inspires giving and enthusiasm and excitement and engagement. That's a great part of our persona. Another part of our persona is called gevura. Gevura means restraint, discipline. Without discipline, you get nothing. So that's left-oriented energy. And then we have the idea of a central energy. Central energy, this is the idea of Tiferet. Tiferet is also known as a personification of compassion, because the giving is giving, no judgment, no discipline, just giving. The discipline is you sing for your supper or you go hungry. Compassion is, please have Rahmanas, I'm hungry. So sing, do what you have to do. No, but the person's not doing it. He's not ponying up. Then why should I give you? You have Rahmanas. So the idea of Tiferet becomes this beautiful synergy of the perspective of discipline, yet the giving of chesed. And it's not simply a mix of chesed and gvura, it's a unique central energy. It's like this is what we would call in modern terminology charisma. A person who's charismatic is not always going and hugging everybody. A person who's charismatic knows when to draw close and when to give you your space. He knows when to engage and when to disengage. There's a person who just has a natural knack of knowing how to get along with people, and there's something about this person that attracts people to them. It's not an abundance of benevolence only, and it's not just being in awe of discipline. It's a synergy. That's Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet. Then comes Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. So Netzach is right-oriented. You engage with what's around you. You also be competitive. Hod is your ability to ignore everything around you. Put on blinders and focus on what you have to do. It's discipline applied. Yesod is connectivity. To be able to connect. And being able to connect, being a good communicator, this is the concept of Yesod. So that's the midot. All of this has to be actualized. Actualize mean not just talk the talk, but walk the walk, so to speak. Malchut means, okay, this is now my responsibility. I'm the king of this castle. I'm going to make this happen. So I'm going to use my chesed, I'm going to use my gvura. I'm going to use my creativity and my desire to give and my benevolence. I'm going to use my discipline and my focus. I'm going to use my competitive nature, and I'm going to use my ability not to become deterred by what's going on around me. I'm going to pull all of this together. I'm going to get the job done. That's called grounding. Malchus is grounding something, anchoring something. So in the Zohar's terminology, when it says Eretz, grounding, ground zero, it represents Malchut. So when Mashiach, when we come to Eretz Yisrael, it says no more impoverished grounding. Now the grounding is going to be rich grounding. So that would mean like this: action that's carried out with no passion, with no enthusiasm, with no joy, it's dry action. So that's like impoverished action. But action that's infused with a sense of electricity and excitement and exuberance and mission and devotion, that's a full blood. That's a rich, like you have a rich cake, a rich bread, rich action. That's rich. It's enriched by virtue of the midot. And of course we know, as we read it, the Zohar, it says, and Rebbe talks about this in Tanya, that the idea of emotions are called like Godfin. They're called like the wings that elevate action. So the Zohar says, once we come to Eretz Yisrael, he says, now there's going to be something amazing happening. Now he says, now we're going to have Kaima siara bepimusa. Now the moon is going to shed its wounds, its diminished state. And the moon represents Malchus. So now Malchus is not going to be diminished. Now Malchus is going to be infused, enriched, radiant. And Malchus can be radiant. So now he says, Mishum dekaimo siya b'shvusa v'le mizbarcha mishimsha. Now it is no longer going to be blessed by the sun. V'lo misnara mishimsha. And it's not going to be irradiated by the sun. Why? Because it has its own radiation. Because the action becomes filled, your actions become meaningful. The action becomes filled with meaning. And he says, in Egypt, it was just like, it was receiving constantly, it was giving constant infusion. It had to constantly rally the troops. It wasn't able to walk on its own. Now, when we come to Eretz Yisrael, everything changes. And of course, coming to Eretz Yisrael represents this idea. And then it says, this is based on the verse, Ki chol bashamayim uva'aretz. And the word chol represents the concept of tiferet, which is that synergy. And he says, Velo itnahara miyovla. It's not going to be irradiated by Yovla. Yovla literally means a jubilee, but in Zohar, Halachic terminology, the word jubilee or 50 represents bina, because there are 50 gates of understanding. So that's what it represents. So the Rebbe's father, in his exile, had very, very few books. One of the books he had was a Zohar. So the Rebbe's father wrote on the margins, he didn't have any paper. On the margins, he wrote on his Zohar, it's very interesting to note, he says, that when he talks about becoming irradiated with emotion, the idea of kol bashamayim uva'aretz, tiferet, it says two things. Number one, mitbarcha, blessed, and mitnahara, and irradiated. However, when it talks about bina, it talks about being infused with intellectual energy, there it doesn't use the word bracha, it only uses the word nahora, itnahara. The Rebbe's father asks, and nobody have asked this question in the Zohar, how come we use two terminologies for the midot, for the emotive side, but only one terminology for the intellectual side? That's the question the Rebbe's father asks. The Rebbe's father suggests that there's a difference between something being atmospheric, which is called makif, or something being pnimi, something being downloaded into in a personal, up close and personal way. So for example, when I want something, the desire and the want, and that's an overarching thing. Ratzon is a koyach makifi. It represents an overarching thing. I want. Which part of me wants? All of me wants. However, when I am energized to do something with my finger, a person says that they want to draw or paint or play music with their fingers, I'm doing something specific. That's the energy of the soul that animates the fingers in a talented and sophisticated way. That's called an or pnimi. And the Rebbe's father draws a distinction between what we call makif and pnimi. Makif and pnimi. He says the isnara miyovla, the idea of the intellectual impact is only possible in a makif and atmospheric way. That's the way he explains the technicalities of the Zohar. I'm saying this in short form because I know we're overtime already. So the Rebbe spoke about this. The Rebbe used to speak about one of his father's notations of the Zohar and explain this. The Rebbe said, what does this mean? And the Rebbe said, let me explain to you what it means in our service to Hashem. Our service to Hashem. Our job is to energize our actions. Not simply to do the right thing, but to do the right thing in a manner that's passionate, in a manner that's filled with exuberance, enthusiasm, joy, and energy. That's the way. That's because Hamakaimam be'emes, the one who really fulfills the mitzvahs with full integrity, is doing it out of love. That's the way it should be, a labor of love. We should love what we're doing. We should love our Yiddishkeit. We should be excited about it. And he said, that's what we have to try and do now. And there's two ways that we can infuse our actions. We can infuse our actions with a sense of passion. We can connect with it and be excited about it. And then he says, we can infuse our actions with a sense of understanding, where what we're doing it radiates with us, it makes perfect sense to us intellectually. And the Rebbe goes on to explain that the hamshacha of midos, when you're anchoring emotions into your actions, that there's two ways for that to happen. He said it could happen in a manner of yesod, which is the central fulcrum of the functional midot, netzach hod yesod, or it could happen in a way of tiferet, which is the emotive side of the midot, chesed, gevura, and tiferet. What's the difference? He says the difference is that one of these comes in a manner which is pnimi, which relates to us in a specific way, and one represents this overarching concept. Only the overarching concept. And he says, the challenge that we have oftentimes, especially once you become observant, is that your mitzvot should not be performed in a deficient manner. Do you know what mitzvot look like in a deficient manner? If you did the action, what makes a mitzvah deficient? I'm not speaking about doing a mitzvah halfway, not doing the full mitzvah. You did the mitzvah exactly as you're supposed to do it, yet the mitzvah is deficient. What does that look like? That's a mitzvah that's called mitzvahs anoshim melumada. That's when we're going through the motions. We're going through the motions. So the husband and wife who have no love lost between them, but they do all the right things. They do all the right things, they do all their obligations, but there's no love. It's a loveless marriage. It's a terrible marriage. They don't scream at each other, they don't fight. They have no love. They live their own separate lives under the same, very respectful, very dutiful. They're friends. That's, or not friends. Courteous strangers. It's not a marriage. If you go through your Yiddishkeit and you're doing all your mitzvahs, you're counting all your mitzvahs, but you're never really thinking about Hashem. You're not in a relationship with God. You're just counting a brownie point so you can go to heaven. It's not about God, it's about me. I got to go to heaven. I got to have fun, So there's no love. There's no ahava. People say, well, who cares? What's the difference? He's doing all the mitzvahs. Yeah, but you're doing the mitzvah in a deficient way. That's what galut looks like. Galut looks like a moon which has gone dark. The moon is there, but it has no light. The mitzvahs are there. You're doing all the things you're supposed to do. However, you're doing it bepigi musa. You're doing it in a way which is lackluster, in a way which is devoid of emotion, which is devoid of excitement, which is devoid of reverence. It's not being done with any emotion or passion. What is an action, a perfect action look like? What does a perfect mitzvah action look like? A mitzvah that's performed with ahava v'yira. A mitzvah that's performed with a profound sense of engagement. When you're present, and you're excited, and you're in awe, and it's an emotional thing. That's what a real mitzvah is supposed to look like. And this is the meaning of having the moon become not simply a reflection, a pale reflection of something, but that the moon, or malchut, actually takes on a life of itself. But the mitzvah is not something somebody has to cajole you into doing, or inspire you constantly, or push you. But there's a you're generating inspiration by yourself. You're not simply reflecting on inspiration, you are generating that inspiration. So the moon that's only reflecting the light of the sun, it has no light of its own. And therefore it's necessarily going to wax and wane. And this is the challenge that we have. The challenge that we have is that we should change the way we do mitzvahs. And if your mitzvahs, your actions, take on a life of their own, then everything changes. Then you're living in a messianic way. Like the famous story of Rebbe Barditchev, who didn't have his own lulav and esrog. So he found out that somebody has a lulav and esrog. So he said, can I use your lulav and esrog? The guy said, of course. And he said, do you mind if I'm here a little early? He says, sure. Can I use it first thing in the morning? First thing in the morning. And the story goes that Rebbe Yitzchak couldn't sleep. He was so excited to do the mitzvah. And he was looking at the china closet, this beautiful glass china that the lulav and esrog are in. And he was waiting to see when day broke. And as soon as day broke, he got so excited, he forgot to open the glass doors. He put his hands right through the glass doors. Oh. And the family woke up to the breaking of glass, and the Rebbe Yitzchak didn't even know what happened. He was like holding the lulav and esrog. right? Or another story about the Baditchever, that he finished eating after Yom Kippur, for whatever he ate after the fast, and he said to his wife, there's no dessert? And she looked at him, dessert? He doesn't ever ask for dessert. He said, yeah, dessert. She said, what do you want for dessert? He said, I want Masechet Sukkah. And then the story goes, after he fasted a whole day and he ate something, he stood on his feet and learned the whole Masechet Sukkah. So by the morning he was finished the whole tractate. That was dessert. Right? So talking about a person who's living that's by the way, a messianic life. That's what we're all going to be like when Mashiach comes. So we have to try to be like that a little more. That means your moon is full. That's the meaning. That's what we're talking about over here. V'hoya, oid halavana, and the Yitzchak explains where. I thought I would have more time to explain this. How there's makif and pnimi, and the difference between the intellectual side of things and the emotional side of things. To make a very sophisticated and long rumination simple, if that's even possible, we can change the way we feel right now. We can get excited about things, but we can't change the way we think. Changing the way you think, changing the way your mind works, that's already, Mashiach will come. Only then that could happen. We will change. Eventually we will become totally changed. We will see a different thing. We'll look at the world, everything we'll look at differently. But that intellectual shift is already when Mashiach comes. Now we only can have it in a makif. We can only have it atmospherically. But emotionally we can't change. This is the meaning, spiritually speaking, of the moon becoming a self-generating star. Like the Alter Rebbe explains, the business of the Sharabar and the Leviathan. It's a spiritual concept. Will it be physical also? I don't know. Maybe. Seems so. How will that work out with the idea of mitzvahs not changing? I don't know. It's a good question. But the point that we're supposed to be, the point is this. As we're anticipating the coming of Mashiach, one of the things that we're anticipating is, and we talked about this in the early episodes of this series, Shlemut HaTorah v'HaMitzvah. The perfect observance of mitzvahs. Like, imagine you want to do mitzvahs. Imagine you want to do mitzvahs perfectly. The perfect observance of mitzvahs, which means the perfect relationship with God, is only going to fully happen when Mashiach comes. So how do we accelerate the process of Mashiach? Or if you want Mashiach to come, then what would you be doing now? The answer would be you're doing mitzvahs as well as you can. Like, what's the logic of somebody saying, I can't wait for Mashiach to come? And you say, why? So Mashiach comes, my mitzvah is going to be perfect. So you say, well, why don't you work on perfection now? Nah, I only want over the top perfect. Like this lame joke that I keep saying, it's not even so funny, but I keep saying again and again, like, the fundraising line, where you come to a person, the guy says, Rabbi, I'd give you $1 million if I could. I don't have $1 million, but you have 5,000. Right? You have 5,000. I give you $1 million. No, I only want to give $1 million. You understand? You want to be part of this? You want to help? You want to fund it? So fund with what you could. People, strangely, they want to know all the secrets of Hashem. How about learning the secrets that are available now? I want to do all the mitzvahs perfectly. Okay, how about doing the mitzvahs that you can now? It's like everybody gets excited when a rare mitzvah comes along. A rare mitzvah is like, wow, special, we're now going to sound the shofar. Guess what? Sounding the shofar on Rosh Hashanah and putting on tefillin in the morning or putting up a mezuzah in your house is exactly the same mitzvah, same in a Torah. Same mitzvah say. How come this mitzvah generates so much excitement? That's human nature. Well, mitzvah that comes once a year is more exciting. We make a shechianu. Okay, understood. But if you're looking for connection and closeness to Hashem, so then, hey, what's going on over here? Then why aren't we looking for mitzvahs with that kind of fervor and excitement? So the bottom line is this. The paradigm of Mashiach coming is the self-generating moon. The moon like a star, radiating like a star. This represents the concept of malchut, or action, which is filled with passion and fervor. A perfect mitzvah, perfect mitzvot. That will happen when Mashiach will come. It's a given. The challenge for us is that we should understand not only every mitzvah we do makes a difference, but how we do the mitzvah makes a difference. How we do the mitzvah. And if we do the mitzvah with fervor, and we do the mitzvah with passion and awe and emotional engagement, then that itself becomes the great accelerator to bring us the time of Mashiach, when our mitzvahs will be full engagement and irradiated with the light of emotional and intellectual connectivity with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that, my dear friends, is basically all we have for tonight. So, I hope that inspires us all to not only do more mitzvahs, but to do the mitzvahs more so. And we should merit, Be'ezrat Hashem, to see our mitzvahs rise to greatest perfection. And the whole world should be illuminated with the light of Torah and of mitzvahs. With the coming of Mashiach b'mheira will be Ameinu, Amen. Thank you for joining. Shkoyach. Thank you all for joining. Please make sure you come back. Please share. If you aren't yet, please subscribe. Bye, Latov.